Till now, we have seen only king's pawn openings. Okay, we saw Italian, we saw French defense. This is the queen's pawn opening. Okay. Black responds with knight to f6. Okay. This is a typical response. You can expect normally black 90% of the time they will play either pawn to d5 as a response or they will play knight to f6. Okay. So knight to f6 is a common response in queen's pawn openings. Okay. White continues with knight f3. What is the idea of knight f3? They just want to develop, okay, normal opening. So here, black plays the move e6. Okay, there are other alternatives, but e6 is also a common move. I come. Varsha, board setup panlana parvalla, try to follow. Okay, focus on the board. Pawn to e6. White replies with pawn to e3. Okay. Any idea what opening system this is? Name of this opening system? This is called as the Colle system. Okay. So white is setting up the system called Colle, C-O-L-L-E, Colle system. Colle system. Okay. Normally, what white tries to do most of the time is they will bring the bishop out, the dark square bishop. They will bring it to f4, and then only they will play the move e3. That is called as London system. Okay. That is the main difference between this London system and Colle system. In Colle system, black is still white, the dark square bishop is still behind the pawn chain. They'll play e3 before developing that bishop. Okay. Later on, they would want to play the pawn to e4. Okay, and open up the center. So that is the idea. Now they will play e3. Okay. Black response with d5. This is a standard response. Okay. Now white plays bishop to d3. Okay. The purpose of bishop to d3 is it controls the e4 square. Seriya. Because e4 square is key for this system and white wants to play e4 at some point. Okay. So they are controlling the e4 square. They play bishop to d3 and it's a normal developing move. Okay. Black plays c5. Why is black playing c5? What could be the idea? They can take on d4. It is a multi-purpose move. One is they want to develop the knight. Okay. And they want to develop it after pushing the c pawn. Okay. So they will develop the b8 knight to c6. Okay. So the pawn is not blocked. Another thing is they want to challenge white's center. So yeah. And if allowed, in future they may also want to play pawn to c4, keeping the white bishop. Okay. White responds with c3. This is also a standard move. Okay. So black tries to undermine the center and white is supporting their center. Okay. Black plays knight d to d7. Okay. The knight might be better placed at c6. In this game, they are playing knight to d7. Knight to c6 is a good move. Knight to b7, knight b to d7 is also okay. Okay, not bad, but they could have played to c6. That might have been slightly better. Okay. But there is an idea behind playing knight b to d7. Okay. That idea is in future, if the f6 knight is moved from there, or if the f6 knight is attacked, okay, and it gets captured, then this knight on d7 will replace that f6 knight, again reinforcing the e4 control on the e4 square. Okay, so knight b to d7 is to support that f6 knight so that in future they can control e4. Okay, so that also is an idea. Knight to c6 is a different idea completely. Okay, black is playing knight b to d2. White is playing knight b to d2. Okay, because they have to develop the knights. Okay, here black is continuing. Black is playing bishop to d6. So far, nothing strange. Standard openings. Okay, standard opening moves. Now, white castles. Castles on the king side. This is also natural. They are doing this for king safety. And black is also castling. Okay, now we have to start playing the middle game. The opening phase you can consider as over. Okay, now you have to strategically think how you can start expanding your position. Where can you move your pieces to develop an attack? Okay, now from white's perspective, can you think of any ideas how to go ahead from here? Varsha follow பண்றீங்களா? Okay. How to continue with white? Sanju, Chandni. Queen to c2. Okay. Queen to c2 is an idea. Black might be tempted to play c4. Okay, then your bishop and queen are no longer in the battery. The queen will move to, the bishop will move to e2, right? But don't give me a move. Tell me the continuation. Okay, what will be the strategy? Even if it is queen to c2, how you wish to proceed. Once opening முடிஞ்ச உடனே then you have to pause. சரியா? Middle gameல you have to think about a strategy. Opening first 8 to 10 moves, they'll be natural. Okay, you will develop the knight, you will develop the bishop, you will control the center. Okay, you will castle. So all that you will manage. After that, you have to start thinking about how to continue, how to develop an attack. Okay. So, Inge, one of the ideas that I told you was to try and push e4. White should try and push pawn to e4. Okay. So, can you think of some move that will support this idea? Rook to e1. Okay. So, rook to e1 is a logical continuation. So, now there is more pressure on e4, right? Okay. Now, black is trying to continue. So, black plays queen to c7. Queen to c7 has two ideas. One is there is a queen bishop battery. Okay. If white is not careful, then which square is attacked? H2. So if the f3 knight moves, then H2 might be under attack. Okay. Another point is later on if the C file opens up. C5 pawn irukku illaya? So if they play c takes on d4 and you also play c takes on d4, then the c file will open up. Black will try to put one rook behind the queen. Okay, and they will try to control the c file. Okay, so that is the idea. What does white do now? The point of the previous move. They played rook e1 for one reason. So they try to open up the center. Pawn to e4. Okay. Pawn to e4 comes with a threat. What is the threat? If black doesn't do anything, white will play pawn to e5. Okay, forking the bishop and knight. Okay. So pawn to e4 comes with a threat. Black has to do something about it. Okay, black edume panlena, they will end up losing a piece. Okay. So black plays c takes d4. Now e5 will not be a problem because the e5 pawn is not adequately defended if white pushes e5. So e5 push panna mudiyadu right now. Okay. So white also recaptures. C takes d4, c takes d4 turn. Okay. Now again the same threat. If e4 pawn goes up to e5, it will fork two pieces. Okay. Same threat is there in the position. So black has to capture. D takes on e4. Okay. Now how should white recapture? White can recapture with the bishop, the knight, the rook, which is a good recapture. Knight takes e4. Why knight takes e4? Why not bishop takes? Attacking the knight is one thing, but if you play bishop takes, knight will, the f6 knight will capture the bishop. Okay, so bishops might be slightly more valuable. Okay, and more often than not, you have to try and keep a bishop there. Okay, so not giving up the bishop is a good idea. So you will play knight takes e4. Knight takes e4. So now black has one piece that they have not yet developed, one minor piece. Okay, the bishop on c8. So yeah, so they are trying to develop that bishop. So they are playing b6. So they want to put the bishop on b7. Okay, bishop b7 also will control the e4 square. So the game is revolving so much around the e4 square so far. Okay, now there is a weakness in white's position, which is what? Which is the weakness in white's position? How many pawn chains are there? For black, how many pawn chains are there? Two pawn chains are there. Okay. For white, there are three pawn chains and there is one isolated pawn. So yeah, the pawn on d4. Pawn on d4 is an isolated pawn. Okay. What does isolated pawn mean? It cannot be protected by any other pawn. Okay. So it has to be protected by a piece. Correct? So the d4 pawn is a weakness right now. Okay, so they play b6 and white plays bishop to g5. Bishop to g5 has been played. Okay, white played earlier, black played b6. Okay, to play bishop b7. Now can they play bishop b7? No, why not? If black plays bishop to b7, what will white do? They will exchange on f6, right? They'll play knight takes f6. After knight recaptures, bishop takes f6, and they will double the pawn, okay, and break the pawn structure in front of black's king. Okay, that will be a weakness for black. So they have to do something. Black is forced to do something now. Okay, so black plays knight takes on e4. Okay, here white can recapture in two different ways. So yeah, they can capture with the rook, they can capture with the bishop. Can you tell me which is the correct capture? Rook. Rook takes. Why? You can bring the rook to h5. Okay. File is controlled by the bishop. So yeah. So why not bishop takes firstly? Okay. So you which piece will get exchanged? Bishop. So you don't want to trade your d3 bishop for black's c8 bishop. Correct? Black c8 bishop is relatively less valuable as compared to your d3 bishop, which is helping attack the king side. Okay. So you don't want to play bishop takes knight, then black will reply with bishop to b7. Okay, and if you don't trade the bishop, if you just retreat the bishop back to d3, black will play bishop takes the knight on f3. Okay, and after queen takes knight, your h2 pawn is hanged. Correct? The queen bishop battery is attacking the h2 pawn. Are you following? If you play bishop takes on e4, after bishop b7, if you try to bring the bishop back to d3, black will play bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and bishop takes h2. Okay, so instead you will play rook takes on e4. Black continues with bishop to b7. Where should you put the rook? You want to put the rook in the h5. Okay. But here, before you do that, I told you earlier that once the c8 bishop moves, okay, what is black trying to do? How do they want to control the c5? They want to put a rook behind the queen, correct? White does not want to allow that. Okay. So white can play an intermediate move, rook to c1, challenging the queen, taking control of the c5. Okay. If you don't play this move, then black will freely play rook to c8 and gain control of that c5. Okay. So now you are challenging the queen. The queen goes back. Okay. Then you play rook to h. With rook to h4, what is the threat? h7 pawn. Okay. If allowed, white will play bishop takes h7 check. Okay. Black tries to stop it. Black tries to stop it with pawn to g6. Okay. But let's see some variations. Okay. Wow. If black plays instead knight to f6, how can white continue here? Just they can take the knight on f6, bishop takes knight, and after pawn recaptures, bishop takes on h2. Okay. Now the pawn structure is also bad. Okay. So bishop to f6 will not work. What if they played h6, just protecting the h7 pawn? Sacrifice the bishop. After bishop takes h6, g takes. What is the continuation now? Rook to g4 check. Okay. And if king to g8, what is the continuation? Queen to d2. Okay. Now there is nothing much to do for black. Black can interpose with the bishop, which will just get captured. Okay. Then white is threatening mate. If black plays some other move, so let's say black is playing some bishop takes knight, you can just deliver checkmate. Okay, wow. So that is why h6 is also not possible. So they are playing pawn to g6. Now, how can white continue putting pressure? Can you think of any weakness in black's position? Bishop to b5. Bishop to b5 attacks the knight. That is the only undefended piece. And the knight does not have any good square to go. Okay, wow. So black will have to defend the knight. And there is only one way to defend the knight, which is there are two ways to defend the knight. You can defend with the queen or with the bishop. Correct? Huh? You cannot put the rook behind the knight because the bishop is covering that square. The dark square bishop will take the rook. So black played this one. Queen to e8. How to continue the attack? Now the knight is pinned. Correct? Ah? Now the black knight is pinned. So it won't be able to move. How to continue the attack? If you don't continue the attack, black will play pawn to a6 and force the trade or kick the bishop. Okay, so you have to do something now. How to continue? Bishop f6. If you play bishop f6, what is the continuation? Hmm. Bishop f6, knight g5. Okay, so you will attack that pawn. They will play pawn to h5. There is a better continuation. You can try to win that knight, the pinned knight. So how can you put more pressure on that pinned piece? Knight to e5. Okay, what can black do? They can capture the knight. Black continued bishop to c8 in this position. Okay, now if they captured the knight, what will be the continuation? You will recapture. Now the bishop and queen both are attacking the pinned knight. Okay, how can you defend? You can defend with bishop to c8, only move. Okay, then what can white do in this position? Group to c7. More pressure on the pinned piece. Okay, so you keep putting pressure on the pinned piece, and the knight cannot be moved. It cannot be defended. Okay, so they will win the piece. Okay, so capturing the knight did not work. So black tried to play bishop to c8, defending the knight. Now how to continue? Rook takes the bishop on c8. Okay, exchange sacrifice. Removing the defender. Now after the rook or queen recaptures, you can take the knight. Okay, capturing with the rook would have meant the queen and rook would have been 4. So they capture with the queen, then you take with the bishop. Okay, now there is a good continuation for, okay, firstly, queen moves out of danger. Okay, ma. Now there is a good continuation for white. You can set up a mating net, okay, using the knight and rook. You play knight to g4. What is the point? Firstly, what happens if queen takes bishop? There is a fork. There is a fork on f6. Okay. So you cannot take it. Apart from the fork, there is another threat in the position. This is also a mating net. What is white threatening? White will play knight f6 check. And after the king moves, rook takes h7 is mate. Correct? So that is the threat. How can black address that threat? Pawn to h5. Okay. What if they played some other move? What if they played pawn to f5? Then what happens? Then you can avoid mate for some time, but still white will simply continue with bishop takes on e6 check and bring the knight, and still the threat is there on h7. Okay, so this is also a hopeless position. What if they tried any other move? What if they tried king h7? There is a mate. Can you find? Bishop f6 check, king moves, knight h6 is mate. Okay, so moving the king does not help. Okay, so they tried h5. How to continue with white? Knight f6 check, they'll play king to g7. Okay, if they played king to h8, then there is a mate. How will white continue then? Rook takes h5, pawn takes, queen takes h5. Okay, so they'll go there and get mated. Okay, so king to g7 is played. Now, how can white continue? Knight takes h5. Knight takes h5 check, and after pawn takes h5, queen takes h5. Okay, there are lot of unstoppable threats. Okay. And if black tries rook h8, white can play bishop h6 check. With bishop h6 check, the king's escape square is cut off. Correct? The king cannot go to the f8 square. So that is block. So after the king moves, you can deliver a check. Okay, fine. Now we don't have much time. So I think this game took a lot of time. So yeah. So now can you two play a quick game? Okay. And then we'll have to take the notations of that game and do an analysis. Okay. We'll try to do that. You can